બેટરી આમાં તો પાછું ચાર્જિંગ થઈ ગયું છે મેડમ વાયર આવી ચાલુ છે રેકોર્ડિંગ ચાલુ અહીંયાથી રેકોર્ડ થઈ જાય આમે ઓલા જો માથે લાલ બટન નથી આમાં કે રેકોર્ડિંગ ચાલુ એસડી કાર્ડ બદલવા ઝંઝટ બોલ સર અત્યારે આનું કનેક્ટ નથી રાખતું
Padma Vibhushan, Dr. Mohsin Aluwale, Honorable Vice Chancellor Professor Dinesh Awasthi, Conference Chairperson Professor Rakesh Dasan, Director LG Institute of Management Studies Dr. Siddharth Singh, Trustee LGK in absentia Dr. E.K. Mehta, Directors of various LGK institutes, esteemed speakers, distinguished guests from various parts of the world, my faculty colleagues and dear students. I, Dr. Himani Sheikh, on behalf of LG Institute of Management Studies, the 2-year full-time MBA program under the School of Management Studies, extend a warm welcome to all of you at the inaugural function of the second edition of International Conference on Emerging Trends in Management Practices, Samavaya 2025, a commencement of insightful discussions on emerging trends in technological advancements that is changing the management practices. We are delighted to host this remarkable gathering of scholars, industry experts, and thought leaders who have come together to share their insights, experiences, and research in the dynamic field of management. This conference serves as a platform to explore the latest trends, foster meaningful discussions, and encourage collaborative innovations that will shape the future of business and management. Over the course of this event, we have an exciting lineup of keynote speeches, panel discussions, and research presentations that promise to inspire and provoke thoughts. As we embark on this enriching journey together, Let us open our minds to new possibilities, challenge conventional perspectives, and embrace innovative management approaches that will drive success in the ever-changing business world. I would like to invite Padma Vibhushan, Dr. Montek Singh Ahluwalia, Honorable Vice Chancellor Professor Dinesh Awasthi, Conference Chairperson Professor Rakesh Basan, Director LG Institute of Management Studies Dr. Siddharth Singh Bisp, Convener Samavaya 2025 Dr. Neha Shah on the dais. Please join me in welcoming them. As per the tradition of Lok Jagriti Kendra, I would like to invite Dr. Siddharth Singh Bisp, the Director of LG Institute of Management Studies, to present a support to our Honorable Chief Guest, Dr. Montek Singh Ahluwalia. I request Siddharth sir to felicitate Dinesh Awasthi sir, the Honorable Vice Chancellor, with a Tulsi pot. I would like to invite Convener of Samavaya 2025, Dr. Neha Shah, to felicitate Dr. Rakesh Basan with a Tulsi pot. I would like to invite all the dignitaries for the lamp lighting ceremony. Thank you, sir. I'd like to invite Dr. Siddharth Singh Bisp, Director, LG Institute of Management Studies, for a welcome address.
Good morning all. I welcome you all to the two-day international conference on emerging trends and management practices, Samavaya 2025. On behalf of LJK University and the School of Management Studies, I take this occasion to welcome Padma Vibhushan Dr. Montek Singh Laluvale, eminent economist and former Deputy Chairman of the Planning Commission of India, who is the chief guest for the conference. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for gracing the occasion. Thank you. I also welcome our Honorable Vice Chancellor of LJK University, Professor Dinesh Awasthi, for gracing the occasion. I welcome Dr. P.K. Mehta, Trustee LJK. I welcome Professor Rakesh Basant, Chairperson of the Steering Committee of the conference. Thank you so much for being the architect of this entire thing. Thank you, sir. I also welcome our keynote speakers, Professor Sebastian Morris, Senior Professor, Go and Social Management, and the Steering Committee member. Thanks, sir, for being here. It's an honor. I welcome Professor Pankaj Sethia, Professor of Information Systems, IMA Chair Professor, and Mr. Mihir Joshi, Managing Director TVFL, who shall be joining us in the later part of the day. I welcome our panelists, Professor Ayom Kyuni, Dean Faculty of Management and Finance, University Tunku Abdul Rahman, Patrick Jaya, Malaysia. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you. I welcome Professor R.H. Gurupuge, Dean Faculty of Management, University of Peradeniya, Central Province, Sri Lanka. Thank you so much, sir. It's a privilege to host you here at the university. I also welcome the panelists who shall be joining us on the virtual mode. Professor Ayin Akhtar, Professor, Institute of Business Studies, Jahangir University, Dhaka, Bangladesh. I welcome Professor Govind Tamar, Director School of Management, Tribhuvan University, Kirtipur, Nepal, and Professor Pavitra Prakash Singh, Senior Dean, Lovely Professional University, Jalandhar, Punjab, India. I welcome the scholars who came all the way from Nepal to participate in this conference. Okay, it's an honor to have you with us. Finally, I welcome all the directors of different institutions, faculty members, scholars and students. I welcome you all to a 2 day of excitement and interest in terms of knowledge sharing and gaining. Thank you so much. And I welcome you all formally to the event. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for the address. With great pleasure, I would like to introduce now the backbone of Samavaya 2025. Our conference chairperson, Professor Rakesh Basant. Professor Rakesh Basant is a former professor of economics and JSW Professor of Innovation and Public Policy at the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. He has taught at universities abroad and worked as a consultant to several international organizations. His teaching and research interests focus on firm strategy, innovation, intellectual property rights, entrepreneurial business models, public policy and regulation. His clusters foreign direct investments in research and development, innovation internalization linkages, competition policy, inter-organizational linkages for technology development, incubation models in higher educational institutions, emerging entrepreneurial atoms and economic systems in India, strategic and policy aspects of intellectual property rights, linkages between public policy and technological change, economics of strategy, the small scale sector in India and policy issues in higher education. He was also a member of Indian Prime Minister's High Level Committee, also known as Sachar Committee, that wrote a report on the social, economic and educational conditions of Muslims in India. In continuation of this work, a part of his current research focuses on issues related to Muslims, especially affirmative action in higher education. His recent book, The Black Box, Innovation and Public Policy in India, was published by Penguin in August 2021. My deepest gratitude to you, sir, for your incredible dedication and unwavering commitment in helping us give shape to Samavaya 2025. Right from planning to execution, you have been a driving force behind each and every detail. Thank you, sir, for your remarkable contribution. I would like to invite sir to share a few words.
Thank you for your kind words. Welcome to the second international conference on emerging trends in management practices. As we all know, the focus here is on the impact of emerging new technologies on innovation in these management practices. We are quite lucky to have three incredible keynote speakers, Professor Western Morris, Professor Fonseca, and Mr. Mihir Joshi, who will be talking about various dimensions of this broadly. We also are quite lucky to have very good international participation this year. We have in all 95 papers that have been submitted. 10 of the authors of these 95 papers are actually foreign authors, the remaining 85 are from India. The broad themes that we had decided on for the conference were 7 themes: finance, marketing, human resource management, sustainable development, public policy and the economy, innovation and entrepreneurship, and transformation trends in new technologies focusing on digital transformation. And we are lucky to have received papers in each of these themes, which will be presented in 17 different technical sessions. Over and above the 95 research papers that we have received, we also have 28 poster presentations. Many of these are done by PhD students, so we are looking forward to their active participation in the conference. The activity of the steering committee was quite interesting because we had people from different countries onto the activity participating from Bangladesh, Nepal, Singapore, Sri Lanka, Uzbekistan, and Malaysia. I'm very thankful to them for helping us create something which is new for the university, and we hope that their participation will continue. And next year, the next time when we do this, we will be able to do a much better job. So, on behalf of the university, I thank all the steering committee members. The other thing which we have been able to do this year is to have a publication partnership. And these partnerships with the Journal of Statistics and Management Systems, some of the curated papers will be published there. I'm sure you will enjoy the conference. Welcome once again, and thank you for being here. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Once again, I'd like to mention we could not have done it without you. I'd like to invite Honorable Vice Chancellor, sir, Professor Dinesh Avasti, to introduce our chief guest for today, Padma Vibhushan, Dr. Montek Singh Aluwale.
Good morning. At the outset, I would like to join my colleague to service in welcoming all of you to this conference. On behalf of the university, on my own behalf, you are here so that this conference is here. And we look forward to your very active participation in discussions. I'm sure these 95 papers will grow very interesting ideas. Now, as us know that technology is changing the concepts of knowledge. At one point of time, yesterday I was talking to them from my school. I guess for 5 courses of portal probably are no more relevant unless you integrate technology in each other. Because it has become a 6th force for any strategy or any management. In this backdrop, we have a person who has steered the policies of this country, who has brought out of darkness this country when we were facing a crisis and left with about 3 years of foreign exchange reserves. Things started moving. And one of those architects, besides Dr. Manmohan Singh, finance minister that time, and of course Narsim Rao, who supported this, the person behind it was Dr. Montes. And we are indeed very grateful to him for accepting our invitation to inaugurate this conference. I'm sure, I mean, he doesn't need any introduction. He newspapers and television. And, you ask a thing and he's there. So most of you have seen him debating and discussing and explaining as finance secretary. He used to explain what budget is all about and why some policies have been integrated, why some policies have not been. So from that point of view, he is a very well-known figure, well-known economist in the country. And not only in the country but outside. I have worked with IMF, a lot of other organizations. So he is very widely known, and I think he was the person whom we could have to call for deliberating all these issues. That what is happening to the geopolitical economy globally and how it is going to affect India, and once India is affected, how it is going to affect businesses in India. Now, born in Rawalpindi, now in Pakistan, his father was a government servant. He was shifting from here to Hyderabad to Delhi and all of places, and did his graduation from very prestigious institutions like Delhi. One very unique thing about him is that he won all the debating competitions in Delhi which were held during that period, without an exception. So he's a great debater. And when we were trying to ask what is going to be the theme which he will speak on and will he write something, he said, well, I will speak at simple. And obviously, the debater need not to write the script, his script is here. So I am sure he is going to share that. His career in Burma, he started in 1968 as a young professional, rising through the ranks, became chief of income distribution division in 1979. He returned to India to serve various high-level positions. First additional secretary to large economy at the time. Later on shifted as secretary commerce, then secretary finance. The government changed. He left the country to set up independent evaluation committee of IMF, which is a very high-paying kind of position and very powerful position because he reported, this committee reported directly to the board. But when again Dr. Manmohan Singh came back, the calling country to be back to India, Dr. Manmohan Singh asked, you are getting very salary, realizing how we not able to afford the payments. He said, doesn't matter. India matters more than I come back. So this is the character of a person. So we are indeed very grateful to him. His book, I was reading through his book, The Backstage, a story behind India's high growth years, which was published in 2020, gives a very vivid kind of account of the entire process of liberalization and economic reforms in India. And I will sound recommend all of you read that book because that tells you how things happen in bureaucracy, how things are stonewalled by bureaucracy, and how you negotiate with them, how politicians we have, and how that conveys, how politicians conveys for a particular thing. So all those things you really get a very clear idea of the whole process of policy making in the country. Anybody who is working in the area of public policy, I think this book is it must be a Bible for that person. Currently, he is a member of Alpha Luxembourg Group, established by the International Institute of Applied Systems Analysis, which is currently he holds social distinguished visiting professor at Stanford Business School, New York University. And Dr. Anupaya was honored with India's second highest civilian award for the Bhushan in 2011, recognizing his exceptional contribution to the economic policy and public service. We are truly honored to have him address our conference and enlighten us about the rigmaroles of policy making and the business. So thank you very much, sir, for being with us, and we look forward to your views and exciting projections, which will be a great learning for all of us. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, the moment we all have been waiting for. Please join me in welcoming our chief guest, Padma Vibhushan, Dr. Montessin for the inaugural address.
Professor Awasthi. No. Okay. Professor Awasthi has wished other distinguished members of distinguished speakers, participants, ladies and gentlemen, students. But first of all, let me say that let me thank Dinesh for his very probably undeserved praise of me. It's always nice to hear praise, particularly at my age, but it's very kind of you all the time. Just believe most of it. It's a convention that you say nice things about whoever's inaugurating a conference. The most important thing I feel is that actually I really don't know enough about what you people as management people actually work on. I'm really an interloper, I'm an economist, and I mean, as he said, I had the privilege of having some important role, I guess, during the management of the crisis in 1991. But the most important thing to remember, and I would guess that a majority of the audience here wasn't even born in 1991. And people my age have to remember that, because the world changes really quite dramatically. So the first point is that whatever we learned from the 1991 crisis was relevant for 1991, but you need to abstract from that something that is a little bit more higher level to try to apply it to the crises of today. In fact, Professor Morris, who will be speaking later in this session, and I had a brief exchange earlier today, that it would be useful to look at countries that have gone through crises. Practically certainly all important developing countries have had crises at different times. And I was suggesting to him that we'll get a conference going which would look at those crises very briefly and try to abstract from that something that would be of general value. I mean, look at it this way. Today, in the 1991 crisis, and I've written about this in the book, my experience, and Dinesh, thank you for referring to it. Marketing is the only thing economists understand when it concerns a book of theirs. That was a very valuable reference. But I thought about it, that if you go back and look at that book, it tells you that we had a very severe crisis. We didn't have enough money to do any imports for more than about 2 weeks, something like that. And when Mr. Narasimha Rao was made Prime Minister by his party, the Cabinet Secretary briefed him and said, look, sir, it's really a mess. We are really on the brink of default. You have to bring a knowledgeable finance minister who would carry credibility in international markets and institutions. And let me say, in those days, it wasn't markets so much as institutions, because we were not that open. So really, we didn't interact very much with the capital market. As far as we were concerned, if we had a crisis, we had to go to the World Bank and the IMF. These were the only fellows willing to provide money. So you needed someone who would have a high reputation with these institutions. And he mentioned two names, Ajit Patel, son of Gujarat, who actually not from Ahmedabad but from Vadodara, and Manmohan Singh. Ajit was, I was told, not very keen to relocate to Delhi. Manmohan Singh became the choice. He became finance minister. Now you think of yourself. If you had a crisis today, and you had a prime minister who suddenly realized that this is a mess, the first thing you would do is you go to ChatGPT and say, look here, I've just become prime minister. I have a huge crisis, what do I do? ChatGPT would tell it. There have been 17 countries that had similar crises, this is what you all did, now you become it. So the world is different. The whole idea of the cabinet secretary coming in and telling him you need a person who deals with advisor, that's now not going to happen. So you're very conscious of the fact that when you're making decisions today, you're not really going to be making them in the same way that we did 30 years ago. And so I thought, what are the facts that make things different? And anything you do today, I mean, a lot of what you're doing is perhaps sector specific or firm specific. Some of it is more broad based. Okay? I thought the following things are different from 1991. And I think if you ever get called in by a prime, I hope you don't have a crisis. But if you have a crisis and you're called in, you must remember that whatever advice you give has to reflect these differences. Some of this has been mentioned. The biggest difference really is, are we just trying to survive? Or is the problem that we have ambitions which we are not currently meeting? Now the present position is we don't have a crisis. I mean, if you're not terribly interested in the growth rate, India will chug along as far as growth is concerned quite happily, somewhere between 5 and 6%. So that's not a crisis. But on the other hand, 5 or 6% is simply not good enough. It will not generate the jobs you need, and frankly, in social terms, while economists like to talk about growth, and some even talk about manufacturing growth. I mean, there are people who say the big problem is manufacturing is growing. Now imagine to yourself, if the country was growing at 8%, but manufacturing wasn't growing, is that a crisis? Some people would say it is a crisis. Personally, I wouldn't think so, because the world has changed dramatically, and the option that you have by relying on services cannot be ignored. But that's an issue that can be separately considered. So the point is that one crisis that we do have, and that is relevant both for micro and macro type analysis, is what's the ambition that we set ourselves? I think the official slogan or target or whatever is Viksit Bharat, which has gone down very well. I mean, everybody I talked to liked the idea of becoming a developed country. Naturally. You need to ask yourself, what does it mean? I mean, obviously, everybody, it's very unlikely that if you ask someone, would you like to be a developed country? They say, no, I'm not really interested in it. I just want to retreat into the jungle and contemplate. Maybe some people are motivated by that sort of very commendable asceticism. But most people would say, it's a good idea, we should part time and we can be developed. So what does that mean? I have no doubt about it that developed means your per capita income should not be as low as it is. It's now about $2,800 per capita. Okay? China is just about 13,000. The United States is 60,000. Our rank per capita are probably 120 and 130. We like to think of GDP. Now, we're a large country, so naturally our GDP is large, although per capita GDP is quite small. And from that point of view, we have been climbing a little bit up the ladder. We are now probably the fifth or fourth largest, maybe just about become the fourth largest, we'll soon become the third largest. And then there will be a huge gap, because we'll be the third largest. It'll take a very long time for some of the other countries to catch up with us, which are below us in terms of per capita income. But we will take a very long time to climb up that ladder. And usually, I mean, the World Bank classifies people, countries, as being developed if they go over 14,000. So from 2,800 today, we need to go to $14,000 per capita. China is already 13,000, as I said. Now this translates into growth. I mean, you can't have a rise in per capita income without having a growth in GDP. And there's lots of calculations done, and these calculations vary. But broadly, you're talking about growing. If you want to become developed by 2047, that's the recent target. You're really talking about 8.5% real growth in per capita GDP or income for the next, 23 years to 22 years. Now, 8.5% average over 22 years will not be a steady 8.5%, because if we actually make the transition, the ability to grow will decline over time. So, a growth trajectory consistent with Visit Bharat means that you should aim at 9.5% in the next several years, allowing for some slowdown as we reach 2047. So if you ask yourself the question, are we at that level now? The answer is unambiguously no. We're growing 6.4%. You know, all these numbers, different people, you get 0.1 higher, 0.1 lower. So I'm not even bothering about that. 6.4, and following three statements are relevant. Number one, is that a good growth rate? Yes. I mean, if you look at what's happening around the world, that's a pretty good growth rate. Only thing is that if you just want to stay where you are relative to other countries, that's wonderful. But if you want to go up the ladder and become a higher per capita, then it's not good enough. So the second question, is that faster than other countries are doing? It is faster, a little bit. Is it enough to achieve Visit Bharat? Definitely no. So what I've said is that the reference rate you should be having, if you want the Visit Bharat objective, is about 9.5% in the next 5 or 6. Then we'll go down. So really from 6.4, you need to go to about 9.5. Let's say. Even if you forget the 9.5 and just satisfy yourself with 9, you're really talking about accelerating the growth rate by approximately 3+% beyond what it is now. Okay? 3 percentage points. Now go back to 1991. The economic reforms that were introduced in 1991 today are generally regarded as a success. In fact, we're very pleased to hear Chief Minister of Gujarat, I think, actually said that, praised Dr. Manmohan Singh for the 1991 reform that were really great. It's in the newspapers today. But those reforms raised the growth rate of the economy by 2 percentage points above the pre-reform record. And we all went around looking satisfied with ourselves, and I think we should all be satisfied. We didn't cause the growth rate. It's all the fellows working, all the managers, and I think the country can be genuinely feel that it did a good job on the basis of the reforms. But having said that, the task today last today is that those reforms, which were continued by subsequent governments, I call that the first generation of reforms, added 2 percentage points to the growth rate. Now, we're talking of adding 3 percentage points. So the notion that we just carry on business as usual, that doesn't make sense. And I think this is recognized. Many people during debates, finance minister, all these government documents, and all, they all say that we must have another set of reforms. But to give yourself an idea of what these reforms are, I mean, the comparative scale, if we actually achieve them, this would be as transformational as 1991. Now, you know, a lot of people come to me and say, sir, we need these reforms. Don't you think we should have another 1991 movement? And that's where I want to qualify that it's going to be different. And let me now mention what I think is going to be different. Number one, technology. You know, we were aware that technology is important. I mean, all economists have been aware that technology is important. I mean, ever since, I think it was 1956, that Solo wrote his famous article about what causes growth. And you know, until then, the usual argument was, you want growth, you have more investment. If you invest 25% of GDP and the capital output ratio is 5, you get a growth rate of 5%. So the whole focus was investment. Then Solo's article demonstrated that, first of all, output is not just produced by investment. It's investment, it's capital, it's all kinds of other things. So he separated out the contribution of different components to growth, capital, labor, and some residual, and found that the residual explained half the growth. This was one of the fundamental things that we ignored in India, because we adopted the approach, we must raise investment, private sector is not doing that much, so let's do it through the public sector, and we jacked up a lot of investment in the public sector. We forgot that growth is not generated just by capital, it's generated by what is called total factor productivity, and the public sector was a disaster for total factor productivity. But very controversial at that time. But I think one of the things that the 1991 reforms established was a very loud and clear departure from the earlier policy. The earlier policy said, we are a socialistic pattern of society, and the public sector must occupy the commanding heights of the economy. When I was a kid, I mean, I believed a lot of this. I mean, my generation grew up with these slogans. And they look credible. It's only in retrospect that you realize that by putting the public sector in the commanding heights of the economy, we actually lowered the commanding heights big time. So that change happened in 1981. We said, look, these are the sectors that were thought to be important and therefore reserved for the private sector, public sector. We were wrong. Open it up to the private sector. A lot of these fellows failed. The other very major difference at that time, I don't think technology, in the sense of disruptive technology, was thought about. I mean, please remember that Tim Berners-Lee, I think, invented whatever the browser or something to access the net only in 1993. There was no internet. So the whole march of new technology, digitalization, telecommunication, that matter, even in a way computers were already there, but they were not connected in the same way as they are today with the internet. So that happened fortuitously, and we're really fortunate that the policies had sufficiently changed that we were sensitive to the fact that this new sector should not be burdened with the old-fashioned approach that denied them imports. And incidentally, there were a lot of people at that time who criticized government and said, ye kya hai software, no body shopping, we should develop our technological strength by developing our own computers, then we will find computers. I mean, when you think about it now, I mean, it's absolutely disastrous thinking, but it was, and I think it was conscious decisions of policy that prevented that from happening, and as a result, we had a boom. Software has grown not just into body shopping and BPOs, but into very creative work being done by Indian software engineers. I don't know how many, I often hear numbers like global capability centers in Bangalore, there are about 20,000. Every major international corporation has set up a global capability center. Today, I mean, this is a legitimate criticism that these global capability centers are actually owned by foreign companies. All we demonstrated is we have the human skills that generate the IP. But the only share that we get out of this IP is the wage that is paid. Most of the rest of the benefit goes abroad. So what is the solution? To my mind, this is an issue of choice. Is the solution that you ban global capability centers? Or is the solution that you should encourage some of the Indian larger corporations to set up global capability centers so that they can interact with original equipment manufacturers and say, don't go to these fellows to design a chip, we can do it for you. And if you want to do that, there are 40,000 engineers or so, more than that, who are actually employed by the global companies who would be available to be hired. But we need some of our big companies, whatever it is, the Ambani, the Tata, the Adani, the LNGs. These are the guys who actually take a bet. Let me hire 20 software engineers and give it a chance for 5 years. And I think, I don't know what they're planning to do, but I think we should encourage that. And I suspect that it will happen automatically. But the important lesson is that it's not correct to say we shouldn't allow the GCCs to come in. The fact that the GCCs are here is what creates credibility. I mean, otherwise, a fellow abroad is getting something designed by Dell or somebody in Bangalore. So one of our big companies can go and say, listen, you're going to Dell, but they're not doing it for you in the US, they're doing it in India, and we happen to be in India. And we've hired all these guys, why don't you rely on us? That gives credibility, and that's what we need to do. So that kind of thing didn't exist. Issue didn't exist in those days. Now the second thing we need to think about is application of technology. Okay? I mean, one thing is of course producing technology. The Chinese have done a wonderful job producing technology. Because the US long ago decided that they are the hegemons of the globalized system, and people generally felt that the US were a benign hegemon in post-war years. I think P.U. Modi used to go around Parliament in those days with a little badge saying, I am a CIA agent. And he would go around saying, I don't like the dominance of the United States. But let's face it, if somebody has to be dominant, I'm glad it's the United States and not somebody else. Now the US has changed quite a bit. I'm not sure that what President Trump is saying will lead anyone to say exactly the same thing. So that you see how the US senses that it's losing its preeminent position. And the Chinese are quite explicitly challenged. They have said at the highest level, and their president, that we're going to challenge you militarily, we're going to challenge you technologically, and we're also going to challenge you as providing an ideal system. So all your talk about democracy, etc., neither here nor there, we are a system. Now that's a very big challenge. So if you were a hegemon, you would be forced to either concede or take it on. Now how you take it on is another question. You could say, yeah, we're competing, but we maintain the global integrated system. Or you do what the US is doing, which is they basically decided that, look, the Chinese have just imitated our technology. Well, it's very credible if they have done so. It's very complex technology. If we tried to simply steal their technology or anything, it's not clear that we would be able to do that. But of course, one doesn't approve of stealing of technology, so the US also had a point. But the critical thing is that the United States has decided that they're going to exclude China from certain areas of participation in the United States. Okay? Now, earlier, the US view was, I think the previous national security advisor of the previous year, Joe Biden's national security advisor, had said, well, this is going to be, we're going to discriminate against China with high tariffs, but as he said, high walls, small yard. In a small area, we erect these high walls. That didn't work too well because, when they prevented Chinese imports from coming into the US, the Chinese just exported via Southeast Asia. So the US trade deficit with China improved, but the trade deficit with other countries expanded. The overall trade deficit was not affected at all. It's an example that, when you're in an integrated and connected world, it's not easy to target people. You set up a targeted mechanism, they go around. But the point is that whatever we do now, we are doing it first, I said, in a world in which technology has changed, and the change of technology is exceptionally rapid. I mean, usually you see lots of these numbers, sentences, in how long did it take for after the first motor car to reach 10 million motor cars in several decades. How long did it take for the first smartphone to reach 200 million subscribers in probably about 3 weeks or so. So, pace of technology change very, very rapid. This has implications. Technology is only important if it is disrupted. I mean, Schumpeter famously said that the real role of technology is to be disruptive. If it isn't disruptive, it's decorative, it may be a marketing gimmick, it doesn't do anything deep down. But with this technology is disruptive. It's not just disruptive, it's happening very rapidly. This will in fact make a lot of jobs redundant. The usual argument is it will create other jobs. That's true. But the difference is where will it create them? I mean, if the rise of chatbots makes BPOs irrelevant within, let's say, 5 or 6 years, huge loss of employment in the BPOs in the Philippines, in India, and other places. Yes, it will create new jobs. People who are doing apps that create these chatbots and so on. So where will that be? Well, I mean, if you're sensible, we should try to make it here. But remember, it is not easy to reskill a BPO guy into somebody who makes these apps. So there will be distributional shifts. And I think the bottom line you have to ask yourself is there a case for slowing down the adoption of technology in order to reduce the impact, or that has a negative effect on growth? It should not be done. We should do whatever we can to climb onto the bandwagon of benefits and try to help those who are disrupted. I would believe the latter, but this is a controversial question. There are a lot of people who would say, let's not import these technologies or allow them to come in. That's one issue. But the second thing is that the world, in terms of trade, has become different. Partly because of the US-China rivalry. When the 1991 reforms were done, it was no-brainer. In the sense that the whole world believed in globalized trade. Every country that opened up and tried to export did very well. We didn't do enough of it, so we didn't do that well. We did well, but we didn't do that well. In the sense, footwear, garments, huge numbers of things that we could have exported. We didn't export because we kept protecting the small-scale sector. I mean, I would say the biggest criticism of the 1991 reforms is the mistake that reservation for small-scale sectors is good for the small-scale sector and good for the country. It's wrong. Had we got rid of reservation, we would have been one of the top people exporting shoes and all these kinds of things. Any number of people would come and say, look, the world is now globalized. You're not selling to shops, you're selling to Walmart, you're selling to huge chains. They want to order 200,000 t-shirts. You've got businesses that can't take an order of more than 3,000 t-shirts. So we just forget about you. We just go to Vietnam or Malaysia or Middle East or whatever. And there are many countries in East Asia that were smarter than us. We didn't have these hang-ups. This, in my view, is a criticism of what we did. But believe me, politically, it was our politics did not allow the government to do it. It's not that the economists didn't recommend it. Many reports said that, look, wherever there's an export market, we should get rid of small-scale reservation. But in fact, it's not even by getting rid of, if you wanted, you could even have said that let's not let existing big companies move in. Just get rid of the reservation limit on existing companies. The best exporters would have immediately expanded. At the moment, what they were doing was they were producing 5 or 6 different companies in order to stay within the small scale limit. Thus losing a lot of economies of purchase, logistics, accounting, etc., etc. So I think the world has changed in terms of trade. But whatever you do, it's going to be more complex. And you're seeing that today because traditionally we used to think that we must promote global trade through the multilateral trading negotiations under the auspices of the WTO. Very long phrase, it doesn't actually mean very much, but that was the slogan. That slogan is now completely irrelevant. I don't think, by the way, that our official negotiators have quite recognized this. Fact is, the developed countries are no longer interested in advancing the multilateral trade negotiation agenda. They're only interested in FTAs, free trade agreements. Now, we have done a few triple free trade agreements which don't add up very much. We are negotiating, that's good, with the UK and with the EU, but these negotiations have gone on for 3 or 4 years. They say that we are now pushing to reach a conclusion. Both the UK and the EU recognize that with the fractioning of global trade and the fact that the United States is levying tariffs on everybody, they also want to tie up some short market access. I think if we work sensibly, these things are always give and take. We should rapidly come to a conclusion on FTAs with both the UK and the EU. This is an interesting thing that many of you have industry connections. You will find that within Indian industry, this would not be agreed. There are many Indian industries that will disapprove of, they will say you're being rushed and pushed into signing an FTA. My view is that this is a matter of negotiation. You have to do the best you can. It has to be a matter of give and take. I mean, government is saying that we are going to negotiate it, but the test is really when you actually get it done. The biggest trading partner we have, of course, is the United States, and there, I'm afraid, they're not interested in FTAs. The US president, quite unconventionally, is taking a completely different approach to trade. Basically, thrown up the rule book and says, I'm going to do it reciprocally. Whatever you have on a commodity, I have the same tariff on that commodity. By the way, if they do that, what it means is that the US will have different tariffs for the same commodity for different countries. With different countries at different tariffs. I don't know if that's going to happen. It is said in the newspaper that the two are looking towards a trade pact. It's not a free trade agreement. It's just an understanding. If you lower some of your restriction on us and we lower some of the problem there will be, quite honestly, the US existing tariffs are not very high. Ours are much higher than most countries. the US will demand a reduction. What do we demand? There are other restrictions which the US places on imports where they could relax. I think we have to negotiate that. How that will be, I don't know. But it's an indication of how, if you want, India's export performance in the last 5 or 6 years has been poor. I mean, as a share of global trade, our exports were rising until about 4 or 5 years ago, and now they're falling. Services have been doing well. They keep going up. Goods, no. So if we want to get back growth rate of goods exports, which is healthy, that should have a kind of top priority. I mean, there are other issues that need to be looked at. One of the things on which there's a lot of enthusiasm about it, and I think it's justified, is really the profusion of startups. I mean, people leaving the university, or at least many of them, not all, for the first time, are not thinking of how to get a government job or even how to get a corporate job. I mean, I'm sure a lot are, but some of the best guys and girls are being tempted to do startups. And you see examples of that. I'm not going to bore you with details, but one of the interesting things is that you frequently hear the number of unicorns. Now, unicorns are a very interesting animal because a unicorn is defined by the market value, but unicorns don't have to be profitable. I mean, if you started something and you're running it on a loss, but people think that you're on to something really terrific, you can always find people to fund you. So you can have a situation where a company becomes uniform, is not making a profit. In my day, a good company was a company that made profit, no longer true. Which of these are going to make it, and which of these are going to leave their investors high and dry? We don't know. But many people say that if even 10% of the startups really make it big, that's worth it. But when I talk to government people responsible for startups, and I say, are you working on the assumption that 10% of the guys that you monitor are going to succeed and the others are going to fail? They're not really prepared to accept that. And this really raises an issue. We have startup funding scheme, which is good. I'm glad. But the logic of a startup funding scheme is that when you start, you can't get money. So the government will give whatever, 10 lakhs, 20 lakhs, 30 lakhs, 40 lakhs. There must be a rule that says that, look, after the first injection of money, if you reach certain benchmarks, which will be objectively determined, we might give you a second injection of money. But after that, go to the market. And if the market doesn't fund you, just die. Are we prepared to operate that system or not? Now, this is actually, when you think about it, it's actually very difficult for a government to do. Many years ago, many of you may have heard of the Indus Entrepreneurs. It's an organization of Indian software guys in Silicon Valley. And there was a president, I think Campbell or something, of the Indus Entrepreneurs who had come to India and he met Mr. Pai. And he gave him a very impressive presentation. We are doing wonderful work. We've got startup funding in Silicon Valley. You have great potential and you should encourage this. So the next year, when he came back, met Mr. Vajpayee again. Mr. Vajpayee told him, I'm glad you're here. I remember you told me that we're going to set up, you've done these venture capital funds. We are setting up a government venture capital fund. This chap said, Prime Minister, please don't do that. So Mr. Vajpayee said, why are you saying this? He said, sir, even the best government in the world cannot create wealth. It can only destroy it slowly. So, Prime Minister was quite surprised to hear this. His view was that if you really want to generate innovation, you better generate a healthy venture capital funding industry, which is private sector. If you do it in the government, I mean, you can be 100% sure that it won't be, government cannot let go. I mean, any joint entity will approve the venture idea on day 1, and then given a second dose on day 38 or day 300. His instinct will be to believe that some exceptional reasons have prevented it from getting funding from outside. So let's be one more. It's just not possible to let go. So I'm just giving you examples of why I think the world has become a lot more complex for you. That doesn't mean you can solve these problems, but you'll be facing a complex one. And I think the government has to also recognize that it's a complex world and simple solutions won't do. I don't have a resolution of that problem, but we need to increase the number of occasions when people in business who are out there taking the risk, know the ground, can communicate back. And by the way, one of the biggest mistakes that people make is many people, including some of my friends, say that, if only the government would consult everybody. Let me tell you, that's a wonderful thing to consult everybody. But the idea that you'll get a consensus out of that is just wrong. And I just want to end with one example, which will explain to you why I think it's difficult. One of the most enjoyable things I used to find when I was deputy chairman of the Planning Commission, to meet with industry groups. Because our job was to feed back to government. What does industry really feel? And it was easier for them to, let's say, criticize the government when they're not interacting with the minister concerned. I mean, obviously, so they come to the planning commission and do their own and so on, and we would take notes. Now, the best thing was the pharmaceutical industry. Because I divided it into 3 groups, and each one was totally opposed to what the other fellows wanted. So if the government had said, we must listen to industry, you would not have been able to come to a conclusion. So let me just tell you what the 3 groups were. Number 1, the foreign-owned multinationals. They had a simple agenda. They said, look, we have access to the best technology, and we know how to produce things. The problem is, A, your companies are stealing intellectual property. So they wanted very tight IP restrictions, patents and all this kind of stuff. Secondly, they did not want price control. Because look, we're bringing cutting edge drugs, and these are the new things. And their point also was that, when you bring in a cutting edge drug, you only sell it under patent protection for about 10 years. After that, the patent dies. And so if you don't make up the money in successful drugs in that period, we had. Their view was that as long as patents exist, we charge what we can, and once the patent expires, competition takes over. Then there were the Indian modern drug companies that were very high quality, that were selling off-patent drugs to the United States and had a reputation for quality. They were not so concerned about patent protection. In fact, they preferred a weak protection because they would be able to produce these things earlier. But they were completely concerned about price control, because they said that by imposing price control on post-patent drugs, you're actually squeezing the market, and we're not able to do as much investment as we could, etc., etc. And they would also say that, look, we are producing high-quality off-patent drugs, and there is the small pharmaceutical sector, unorganized practically, which is producing the same drugs at low quality. And what is happening is that when the NGOs go to the price control people, they say, look, here is an aspirin produced by a high quality company, which costs much, and the same product produced by the lower quality companies produce much less. impose price control to lower the price they can charge. These fellows, modern companies would say, look, these guys are not maintaining any quality at all. If you want a quality done, this is the wrong thing to do. So you have a wonderful example, three parts of the same industry taking a completely different view. So I think we need consultation for sure, but when you do the consultation, you also have to recognize that we get different viewpoints. And many of you will be management consultants to each of these groups. So you may see the tension in your own work life. But resolving that is not easy. However, transparency in what we're doing is the most critical thing. As we become more sophisticated and more capable, this will become a bigger and bigger problem. So these are just some thoughts I have, mainly to put across that we're at a very exciting point where technology produces lots and lots of opportunities. But we only get the benefits if we get the policies right. And we will easily muck it up by getting the policies wrong. That will actually prevent the injection of all these new technologies into the economy in a productive sort of way. Well, thank you very much for inviting me and listening to
Thank you, sir, for the enlightening inaugural address. We have deeply benefited from your wisdom. I'd like to invite questions from the audience, and Vice Chancellor, sir, will take it forward.
Well, normally inaugural addresses are not ordered by any question answer. But the way he has raised an issue, there could be quite a few questions, quite a few curiosities, quite a few notes of dissent. Or something which he has said. So I would like to open the house. If you have any question, please do ask. But before I open the house, I just put my presidential remarks right away because it has some questions. And after question answer, we will not have any subscription mode or action mode. Address and we will complete the. Sir, I do not agree more with what we have talked about Viksit Bharat, where we need to grow at the rate of 9.5% or maybe more to reach that stage. Particularly if you look at per capita terms, where we are and where we need to go. So besides the numbers, it's not a matter of economics, but it's also a matter of politics. So, when you are there, you have raised right question that how do we grow? I think unless we look at the other side, no, unless we have skilled and educated manpower, I don't think we can think of reaching Viksit Bharat 47, even Viksit Bharat 97. Look at the budgets. Constantly, the allocation on education is going down. It still is in pathetic condition. You rightly said that you are engineers, but our 85% of engineers are unemployed. So, what's the level of experience? How do we reach there unless we have a kind of policies? Signal is health. So, these two social sector pillars, I call them, if they are not addressed, but in both the cases, the investments are declining. Try to prioritize, I don't think that is the answer in a country like India, where the huge number of people are poor. Our government will say that there is no poverty. No, I wish it was true. As far as Indian software is concerned, the lifestyle we are cyber police. We are not producers of technology, but we are consumers of technology and consume technology for others or ourselves. Now, this is the condition. How can we grow in this direction where today investment of R&D is 0.6%? Unless you raise investment on R&D, domestic R&D, how can we not that the research will be conducted outside? China is investing for 3.8% or 4% of GDP on R&D. How can we compete with them? And this 3.8% is of their GDP, not our GDP. It is much higher. US is about 4.5%. I mean, look at these countries, including countries like Malaysia, they are investing more of their GDP on research and development. So we are not investing on research and development. We are not investing properly on education. We are not investing properly on health and then we talk this is Bharat 47. I have my own apprehensions. I would be very grateful if you enlighten us. As far as startups are concerned, yes, there is this is the global phenomenon, not only Indian phenomenon, but some of the startups are doing amazing work and now major funding for startups is coming from private sector. Because there is a saying that from where the startups get funding, initial funding, when they start the company, it's friends, family, and schools. So they are the first investors in this company. So schools need those who have tremendous faith that with great order. So it is great to have